Hey guys, Rob here at 3D Printscape. So today's video is going to be covering getting started with the Mecpow X3 Pro, which I have here. I'm going to cover everything from a quick unboxing to the actual physical setup and going over some of the software components. And then at the end, I'm going to give you my thoughts on the unit itself. There are two variations of this one. They have the X3 and the X3 Pro. This, like I said, is the X3 Pro. It's got a 10-watt laser and the air pump system. The X3 has a 5-watt laser and it doesn't have the air pump system. Everything else is the same. And then I'm going to make a recording covering whether it makes sense to do a standalone unit like this or to get the laser and controller and attach it to one of your existing 3D printers. There are pros and cons of each approach. As you can see, this one is relatively large. The grid measurements here on the x-axis go up to 450 and the y-axis go up to 500, but they say the usable measurements are 400 by 410, so that's really what you'll be looking at if you're looking at the size of what it can actually engrave or cut. If you have any questions about what I'm covering or would like to see any other videos, go and leave a comment below or join us on Discord. Alright guys, so here's the box the Mecpow X3 comes in. Overall, it's not too big or heavy, so it's easy to get around. So let's go ahead and open it up and see what we have inside. Alright, so I went ahead and opened up the box. Let's go ahead and take a look and see what's inside. We have the instruction manual, networking and power cables over here. Then we have the height calibration disc here, which we'll talk about more when we actually go through the setup. A pair of safety goggles and a cleaning cloth. The actual laser itself. Then we have some of the hardware here that's needed for the install itself. Over here we have some test boards and an aluminum sheet, which is going to be used if you're doing any type of cutting so you don't cut through what's below it. Screwdriver. The framing materials here, so just pull these out. The actual controller itself, which has an emergency stop and an alarm on it. Two things that I did like about this when I was going through some of the product reviews was that if it detects any type of smoke or anything, or if there's a tilt, so if it was to fall off or something, it's going to stop that laser right away so you don't have any other issues. And then we have one of the axes here that has everything connected already. Then over here we have the rest of the framing material with the end stops already installed. And then these ones do have measurements on them as well. We have some belts. And then in this box, we have the air pump, which is nice that they included, especially at this price point. So let's go ahead and start with the install. Alright guys, so I laid out all the pieces that we're going to be using here for the actual setup, and I have the instructions right here. What we're going to want to do is start just building the frame out. We're going to start by connecting these two together here, so X and Y, and making sure that our 0 and 0 are connected right here if you're looking at the actual measurements. I really do like that they put the measurement on here. It gives you a good sense of where things are at, especially when you're trying to use the software. So we're just going to do that with two of the bolts here. Alright, now that we have the first X-axis in place, we want to go and put the belts through this X-axis assembly. We want to do it now because it's almost impossible to feed the belts through once it's all the way together. The instructions kind of mention it. I will say that it's pretty vague there. I actually didn't do it, so I had to kind of go back through, take off everything I did to get to this point so I can show you guys how to do it right. Alright, so what we want to do is take our belts, we will feed them through the axis here, and we want to make sure that the teeth are going into the gear and that the belt is below the wheels. So when it sits on the actual axis, the belt will be in the grooves and the wheel just cover over it like it normally would. So we want to do that for both sides and then go ahead and slide it into place. Alright, so now we should have this X-axis assembly on here with the belt under both sides and it feeding through the groove here where the wheels are. Then we can just slide these forward a little bit. We're going to end up feeding them out both ends and then attaching them with a bolt and these washers here. Alright, so the next step is we need to attach the last X-axis, so let's go and do that. I have that here. And it's just going to be 2 screws like the first one was. Alright, once that's in place, we're going to go ahead and attach our controller box in the front. We're going to need one of the small screws, one of the larger screws, and the washer here. On the left side of the controller box, it's going to go up front here, but there's a groove at the top. The belt is going to feed through that groove so that we can use the smaller bolt here and the washer to attach it in place. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so I went ahead and put the larger bolt in. When we're doing the smaller bolt here with the washer, I would not over tighten it yet because we might have to adjust how far the belt comes out of each side. So just go ahead and kind of put it in loosely so you can make that adjustment. Alright, now that the controller is in place, we're going to go ahead and put the 3 legs on. It's pretty much going to be the same thing here. You've got the 2 bolts which are going to attach to your X-axis, and then we're going to feed the belts through this groove here on the actual legs, and then again you're going to use the small bolt in the washer where the belt is, but I wouldn't over tighten it yet until we know for sure that it's in the position we want it. Alright, now that the legs are loosely in place, what we're going to want to do is make sure that the belt's about even on each side, and then go ahead and tighten one side. So I'm going to do that and then tighten the front, and then what I'm going to do is go to the back and pull the belt so that it's tight, and then go ahead and tighten that down. Alright, now that we got the front tight, we can go ahead and pull this belt through. We're going to want to make sure that it's tight, similar to like the belt on a 3D printer. Alright, then we're going to do the other side. And then when you're done with that, if you want, you can trim these belts a little bit. I'm just going to leave them, it doesn't matter to me, but it's up to you. Alright, so now let's go and grab our laser. We're going to attach that. Alright, now that we got our laser, we're going to go ahead and grab the screw that's left, which is like a thumb screw, put it in this little groove here. It's used for adjusting the height so that we have the laser at the right height based on what we're printing with. So just go ahead and loosely put it in there, then just set it on the track and then tighten it towards the top. And then we can go ahead and attach this cable here right to it. It only goes in one way. Alright, now that that's in place, we need to attach the cable for our Y stop. So that's just in front here. The stop's on the bottom of the brick. You can see right here, it just attaches. So these 2 cables. And that's pretty much all there is to the assembly. So next I'm going to show you how to adjust the laser height, and then we're going to jump over to the computer, get everything connected there. So I'm just going to turn this really quick. This is not the best desk for this laser, so it probably won't be used here, but I've got other areas I can use it. Alright, so let's say we're using the sample board this came with. We're going to put that there. Then we're going to use the height plate that it came with. You've got to peel this off, but I'll do that in a couple minutes off video. And kind of put that there, and then unscrew the laser so it can slide down, and just go ahead and let it drop till it touches the top of the spacer and then tighten it in place. And then you can just slide that out of the way. Now you're at the right height for doing engraving on this board. All right, so the final step here is to set up the air pump. This kit does come with one, so I suggest you use it. It is optional, but what it does is it really helps to prevent some of the burning. If you don't use the air pump, you'll see a lot more burning or like black char around some of the edges and stuff when you're doing any type of deeper cuts. And like I said, this kit comes with it, so I would definitely use it. So we've got the pump here itself. We've got the power for that. And then we have the hose and the adapter. So we're going to go ahead and connect the adapter to the actual laser itself, and then we'll run everything. All right, so what I'm going to do here is disconnect the tubing from the adapter that goes into the laser housing. So just push in on this on both sides, and then you can pull the tubing out. All right, with that disconnected, we're going to go ahead and put this on the laser itself. It connects over on this side. It just screws into place. You're probably going to have to raise or remove the laser to do it. Either way, it's fine. I'm just going to raise it a little bit. All right, then when you're done, you're just going to want to make sure that the actual bolt is tight and that the air nozzle or the air input is facing up. And then we would just reattach our hose. And you would run it up along here, along pretty much the same way as the wiring. Now, if you're going to leave this connected all the time, which you probably would, you'll want to just zip tie this to the wiring and make sure that it's straight here so that you don't have any issues. What you don't want to happen is when it's going one way or the other, that it's pulling this and causing resistance. So I'm just going to connect this here. And over here, leaving the same amount of slack as there is on the wire. And if you have any extra zip ties, you can add a couple more here so that it's connected better. So I'm going to do that. All right, once that's done, you would connect the other end of the tubing into the pump. So basically it's going to connect right here at the top. Do that, and then you'll connect the power to the bottom. Then you'll be able to plug it in and just make sure that it does work. This is not going to turn on and off with the actual unit, so you're going to want to just kind of set it up and know about where to power it. I would probably start with it about halfway up, kind of play with it from there. But as far as the actual setup goes, that's everything there is to it. So I'm going to do a quick walk around of the device itself, point out a few things, and give you my input. And then we'll jump over to the computer and go ahead and kick off a engraving. Now that we have everything set up, let's kind of talk about the unit here for a second. Now, it does give you a nice large area. With the standard rails, it gives you 500 by 450 millimeter engraving area, which is very large, especially if you're coming from just adding a laser to a 3D printer. So that's really nice. They do have longer rails if you wanted to increase the length on the y-axis. I think you can buy those online, and it's just a matter of swapping things out because most of it's done on the software. Your control box is up here in the front. There's a couple things I want to point out here. On the inside right here, there's a switch to turn on or off the flame sensor. It's on by default. I recommend keeping it on, but if for whatever reason you wanted to turn it off, you can do that here. You have your emergency stop, so just hit the button and it will stop. You have a key in the front. You can leave it locked. So right now it's locked. I will not turn on or off, or you can go ahead and unlock it, leave the keys there, and it will turn on and off for you. But just a safety thing to prevent little kids or anything from kind of getting their hands on it or doing things they shouldn't be. If there's any type of alarm, it's going to light up here, and like I said, the emergency stop. Your USB port is here, and it does come with a USB cord, which is nice because a lot of them don't. And then you have your SD slot here, which if you're going to be connecting to the computer and using any of the software there, most likely you won't be printing from the SD card, but it is an option. And then in the front, there is a red button here just for reset. I don't think you can see it from the camera angle, but it is there. But it just does a restart for you. And then we got the laser itself here. Since this is the Pro, it comes with the 10-watt laser, which that's what this is. If you don't get the Pro, it comes with a 5-watt. The big difference between the Pro and the standard is the wattage difference, and then the 10-watt one, or the Pro, comes with the air pump as well. One thing I did want to point out with the emergency stop button is if it's down, even if you power it on, it shows that it's powered on, or it sounds like it's powered on. But if you're connecting it to your computer, if this is down, you're going to get just a connection timeout. It won't actually connect. I spent probably a half hour trying to figure out what was going on before I realized that this was actually down. So just make sure you have it popped up. If you get a connection timed out or anything from the computer, go ahead and check this first. Alright guys, so here's a couple sample engravings I did. First one I want to talk about is going to be this card here. It's basically a power and speed test, and it's used to let you know what speed and wattage to use for your engraving. Probably around 3,000 millimeters a minute and around 40%, give or take. So about right here is where I like. So I would be doing most of my engravings at that. But this gives you a full range from 10% power to 60% power, and from 2,500 to 3,400 millimeters a minute. And if you're printing one of these, I would recommend starting on the lower end first to see if you need to go higher. So I also did the higher end. So here you can see it's kind of burnt a little bit. But I did 10 to 100%, and then from 1,000 to 1,900 millimeters a minute. And as you can see here, these are just way too dark. So with a 10-watt laser like this kit has, you're not going to need to be turning up the power that high or going that low on the print speed, at least for engraving. When you get to cutting, that's a different story. All right, now let's go and bring a couple samples over here. So the bottom one here, I did at 35%. I was testing between 35 and 40%. It's just a QR code for my channel. That turned out pretty good. The top one here is just a monkey with headphones, just kind of a cool little image. I didn't mess with the settings or anything, and just printed it at 40%. So that came out pretty good as well, at least with this particle board. On the back side, this is what I wanted to talk about a little bit more. Here I've got an eagle. I switched the image type to threshold, or the engraving type. And on this first one, I didn't mess with the brightness at all. These are both at 40%, and you can barely see it. It's almost like it burned in some areas. On this one, I changed the brightness in light burn, so I was able to actually get a lot of the details here that you don't see over there, even with threshold. But I think overall, the engraving that this can produce is quite nice. I mean, there's a lot of detail in here, and it did turn out really well. Alright, so these are the engraving samples that I did. I will make another video covering cutting a bit more, but the 10-watt laser can cut. I mean, I've cut half-inch oak with 10-watt laser, just gotta adjust the passes and all of that. If you go with the 5-watt laser, you can still get through some pretty thick material. It just won't be as clean, and it'll take a lot longer. If you are curious about what wattage laser to buy, I did make a video covering that. I'll link to that in the description below as well. Alright guys, so like I mentioned, the manual that came in the box seemed to be outdated. If you go to the Mecpow website, they have the manuals. I'll link to this in the description below. But this walks through the setup, which we already covered. But more importantly, it walks through your drivers. So once you get to page 15 here, it talks about the drivers. So basically you'll go to this site here, which again, I'll copy this link into the description below, and download the drivers. So it'll take you here. So you'll download for whatever OS you're running. I'm running Windows 11, so I'll use this one. And then we'll go ahead and extract that, and then we just launch it. Alright, at this point you should have your printer connected and powered on as well. If you don't, it's going to say that it successfully pre-installed the drivers, but what I noticed was it didn't actually map it correctly afterwards when I plug it in the printer. So just go ahead and power on the printer first, so you can avoid that, and just hit install, and then it will just say driver install successfully. Hit OK, and then you can close it. Alright, next you're going to want to launch whatever software you're using. You can use Laser GRBL. I prefer Lightburn. I did purchase a copy as well. For this example, I'm going to use Lightburn. So when you first launch Lightburn, you're going to be brought to this device list. If you have the drivers and everything set up properly, so if you install the drivers like I just showed you, you should be able to go to Find My Laser and hit Next. And it should show up. If it doesn't, I would try restarting your computer. Alright, so from here we'll just hit Add Device. You can give it whatever name you want. And it has the size in here as well for you. And origin should be front left. And go ahead and hit Finish. Now we'll just select this and hit OK, and you should see that here, and you should see Ready over here. And if you go down to Home, it should home as you would expect. One setting we need to change is the speed, so go up to Edit and Settings. This is your first install of Lightburn and you haven't changed this before. It's going to be millimeters a second. You want to switch it from that to millimeters a minute, unless it's going to be really difficult to get your right speeds. Alright, so let's go ahead and import a image to work with. So I'm just going to go to Open, Downloads. So if you don't have anything in there and you know the image is in there, just switch this from Lightburn file to all supported. And then here's your JPEG. Now you want to set your size. So in the examples that I showed you, the one board is 100 by 100, the other is 100 by 200 millimeters. So I'm going to set the height here to 90, and it will adjust the width as well. And then I like to move this over to about 20/20, so 20 millimeters off each axis. Now if you're putting in a larger image and need to use a whole space, you'd want to get it as close to 0 as possible. It's just a little bit easier to align everything with it here. Then with that in place, you can go to Image, Adjust Image, and you can make any type of adjustments. On the print that I did, that I showed you guys, I didn't change anything. I left it as Jarvis, so it looked like this. On the one at the Eagle, I switched it to Threshold, and then I also adjusted the brightness on that. So what you'll notice is if you go into Preview, you'll be able to see what it would kind of look like. Oops. So if you hit play, if it's too dark or everything is kind of blurred together, the laser's not going to be able to distinguish between them. So that's kind of what happened on that first image I showed you with the Eagle, where everything was kind of blurred together. But adjusting the brightness, I was able to see what was going on and make it look better, like on that second image. So this kind of just gives you a preview of what it's doing and kind of how it will look. Now that you have that set up the way you want, you're going to want to adjust your speed and power. So from that chart I showed you earlier, I kind of like 3000 millimeters a minute with a power setting of 40. So that's how I have that set. Keep in mind this is a 10 watt laser, so if you're going up to 100, you could potentially be cutting into the board. So make sure you know the material you're working with and what power and speed settings to use. And then go ahead and hit frame. This is going to frame the area where it's going to be engraving or cutting, and that will help you align whatever material you're using. So you can hit that a couple times just to make sure you're starting it at the right point, and then just go ahead and hit start. Alright guys, so that covered everything you need to know to get started. Hopefully you found that valuable. I will say that for the average user, I think the one that they would want to go with if they wanted to get this model would be the X3. If you're doing a lot more of the cutting, then the X3 Pro might make more sense for you. But the cost difference between the two is enough to make you really want to question what makes the most sense for you. I think there's about like a $80 or $90 difference between the two. Having the bigger laser and the air pump system is nice. So if you're thinking you might eventually want to do more of the cutting, then it might be worth going ahead and getting the larger unit now. But if you know you're only going to be doing light engraving, it doesn't make sense to spend the extra cost. But overall, I do like this unit. The engraving quality is good. I did a couple test cuts that had no issues going through thickness up to, one board I did was a 1/4 inch oak. So I knew a 10 watt laser can go through it, but I figured I'd do a test anyway. But at the end of the day, if you are looking for a standalone engraving or cutting kit, this is a really good one for the price. I mean, they can go up quite high in cost. So this one, for the price, you're getting a lot of bang for the buck. If you have any questions about what I covered or would like to see any other videos, go and leave a comment below or join us on Discord. Thanks.